You want to drop in on the chat, where you're from or where you're coming in from. And then as we go, this will be pretty quick. But if you have questions or anything is something kind of resonates or say questions or you want to add a couple thoughts, Derek will be kind of watching that chat box and will toss those out to me and the public domain as needed. But yeah, I'm going to give some frameworks and some tools, et cetera. So
Yeah. Yeah. We do want this to be a good use of your time. So certainly if you have questions as they pop up, as Michael's walking through some of the stuff, throw them in the chat and I'll try to pepper them in the appropriate places to get any answers you might need. But we appreciate you guys making some time on your Friday morning to jump on and learn a little bit about Michael Simpson and the approach that Simpson Executive Coaching has for some formality around 2026 strategic planning. I know a lot of companies try to do a strategic plan once a year. It's not always the same people. So you might not have 20 years of experience doing strategic planning because it changes every year. Michael has 30 years of doing it with a lot of organizations. So he's put together a really tight way of making sure those are really effective strategic plans and that you have a better chance of actually accomplishing them. So we're glad to have him on here today with his expertise. Again, he's got 30 years of experience doing this with executive teams as well as frontline leaders. And so no matter where you fit in the organization, this can be applied to your team. And we look forward to our time together today. Michael, go ahead.
great.
If there's anything else that you wanted us to say at the beginning here.
No, and I think that's great, Derek. Great context. And really what we'll do is I'll kind of cover the 5 steps for strategic direction, five kind of areas or steps that every great leader must be thinking about as they're leading their organization, they're leading their business unit, their department, their division, they're leading their team. But these are the 5 key things that every leader needs to be, I think, nail and do really, really well. And then we'll kind of drop into the 5 steps for building a winning strategy. And then certainly Derek at the end will be available. If we've got a couple handouts or a couple things, we want to talk about next steps or anything, certainly he's available and we're here to be a resource to you as well. As Derek mentioned, I've kind of ran Simpson Executive Coaching for a number of years. And also I worked at Franklin Covey for 30 years, well, 25, either full-time or contract. So I have a good relationship with them, but I've really ran global coaching since about 2008, certifying executive coaches and working with coaches worldwide and worked with a lot of great companies. Those are a couple of books that I've written, Powerful Leadership Through Coaching and also Unlocking Potential, both coaching books from a leadership and a strategic perspective. Here's a couple of clients I've worked with over the years. Some are local, some are small, some are startup, and others are, multi-billion-dollar companies. And then we've got a lot in the government space, spent a lot of time working with the government, and also different countries have applied this to the nation or the setting strategic planning for the country of Malaysia. And so at a country level, have done some pretty high-level strategic work as well. Really, the agenda today, as I mentioned, is kind of the big 5 and 5 steps. And then at the end, if you want some information or you want to sit down and do a free scoping call or a facilitated session, we could certainly do that. Now, I like this quote from a colleague and a friend of mine, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. He's in the coaching space. I'm sure many of you have heard of him, but he always likes to say kind of what got you here won't get you there. And that's the role we find ourselves in as leaders is we've got to lead ourselves and we've got to lead an organization or a department or a division or a group of people towards a better desired future state. The world's changing at such an unprecedented rate with globalization, with markets, with technology, with AI. All of these forces and factors are driving change. And so that kind of comes with this paradox. And Peter Drucker, kind of the top management thinker in the world, has said most organizations that and leaders that he works with are overmanaged and underled. And so we have sort of this paradox between we want to go out to this desired future state, and then we're kind of stuck in this urgency of the day-to-day, the details of being overmanaged. And many times people don't have the skills or the competencies or even the capabilities to look around the corner or to think holistically or to think out into the future. And so, as Derek said, we're hopeful that you just pick up a couple tools you can put in your toolbox that will help you on that journey. So let's jump into the big five and give context. The first area, and I've got this in my book in coaching 7 core factors for organizational and team change, but I'll just kind of hit at a high level the 5 of the core. Number 1 is your mission. What's your purpose? Why do you exist? There's a lot to be said about just, hey, you got to make money and you got to make money in a sustainable way. But overarching is, how do we have sort of a mission with a conscience, right? It's, you can make profit, but it's also with purpose. So we need to be thinking about, what is our purpose? Why do we exist? Who do we serve? What's our contribution? The values are our codes of conduct, right? Those are it's the mindset, the language, the behaviors, our core beliefs. And we need to have that explicit either in an individual level or an organizational level, because that helps us make hard decisions. And we don't want to just make it on performance metrics. We want to make it on what is the right thing to do based on our morals and our ethics and our values and our beliefs. And so everyone, either individually, as a team, or as an organization, has to have a strong sense of values. Our vision, oh, and by the way, the first two, the reason why those first two are there, they're core. They don't change. They're timeless. They may change and tweak a little bit. I'm working with the Catholic Archdiocese in New York, their healthcare system. And after they're at about, about 700 million. They went from 4 to 700. We'll get them to 1 billion. And we're working on these areas, but we started with mission and values, and they've tweaked their mission and values after about 14 years of existence. We tweaked their mission a little bit this last year. We tweaked their values. Ironically, we had to have Cardinal Dolan, Timothy Dolan, His Eminence, who reports right to the Cardinal. He had to sign off on that at a board meeting and say, yes, this is aligned with where you're going. Vision is important because many people lose sight of the vision because of the day-to-day. And we want to know, what is your moonshot? You got to be really clear on, what does success look like in the next 10 years? Now, I was working doing a big program for the Department of Defense, a 3-year rollout with all of their senior level military officials from Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, OPM, DOJ. And I was with the number 2 woman from NASA. And I was in a coaching session. I led this week-long program in Loudoun County, Virginia. And I asked her, I said, what is your vision now? Because your vision in the past was land a man on the moon, return him safely to Earth in this decade. What's your vision now? And she goes, well, the last administration didn't give us a lot of money and really wasn't fueling the investment around our vision. But the new administration that came in gave us some money, and we've been articulating it. And she goes, we're going to land a man on Mars, or a woman, or both. And she goes, that's our vision. We're going to give the intergalactical stuff out to the Elon Musks of the world and other commercial folks to go after the intergalactical stuff, but we're going for Mars. That's the big idea. Very, very clear on what success looked like. The next one is strategy. We've got to understand, what is your competitive advantage? What is your uniqueness? How do you differentiate yourself? How do you go to market? Markets, channels, customers. And so we've got to have a clear sense of our intentional strategic plans with some flex, because all grand strategies don't always work. But we've got to have a process to get there. And that's over, how are we going to win over the next 1 to 5 years? And then backing out of that, we got to have clear strategic goals. What are your SMART goals organizationally at the top, strategically, operational, and down to team and tactical? And do we have alignment? What are your most important goals despite some of the noise in the day-to-day whirlwind. And then the last, I didn't number this, but we've got to have governance, communications, accountability, and a ritual to keep us on track as we go forward. Now, there's a great hockey player, if you enjoyed ice hockey, by the name of Wayne Gretzky. I saw him play when we lived in New York City. And he was asked, why are you the most successful hockey player in the world? And he made a very profound statement. He goes, I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest. And he goes, but I didn't go to where the puck was. I always was anticipating, where's the puck going? He was always kind of a couple steps ahead of everybody. And so I think that's how we need to be thinking as leaders is, yeah, we got to deal with the here and now, and how do we maximize the here and now, and how do we be successful with the here and now? But we always need to be looking around the corner to the future of where's the markets, where's the channels, where's the customers, what are the big opportunities? And that deals with innovation and creativity and brainstorming, and thinking about the future with great data. And so we always want to be anticipating to where the puck is. And that's where our strategic framework that I want to spend the rest of the time on is really in these 5 areas. So you have kind of the big 5 from a macro perspective as a leader. And then we've got to back in and say, how are we going to win? How are we going to dominate, compete, and win with our customers or in those markets we choose to compete in? The first one, and this comes from, you can see on the bottom referenced, Unlocking Potential. That's my red book. That's chapter 7. And then chapter 8 is more around goal clarity and execution. But chapter 8 is around seeking strategic clarity with both vision and strategy. The first one we have to look at are, what are the forces and what are the factors that are in our competitive environment? Where do we choose to play? Right? Not only what is our reason for existence, but how can we best satisfy our customers? How do we drive sustainable financial success? And we might be going through a merger and acquisition, or we might have certain financial conditions where interest rates go up and lending and cash, access to cash might be limited, or it's more expensive to get cash, or we're dealing with labor, war for talent in a labor workforce, or government regulations. I know in the healthcare industry, it starts at the federal level, then it comes down to the state level, and we're driving a lot of cost measures and controls because the world's changed in terms of reimbursement for medical services. But you're looking at disruptive technologies and supplier partner networks. You're looking at globalization, localization. And so you've got to understand, we're not trying to solve what's going on. We're just trying to understand the forces and factors. And that's really from Michael Porter, and a lot of his work at Harvard Business School, from what are our competitive forces. Job to be done is really kind of some of the thinking around Dr. Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School, but he says, what is the product hiring you to do? What is the service hiring you to do? What is the technology hiring you to do? What is your job to be done? And whether you're in an internal support function of HR, finance, IT, legal, and you've got internal customers you're serving, or if you're looking from how do we go out to market, what does our external customers want? We have to look at both sides. Now, from a strategic perspective, we always got to go external first, and we got to go organization first. So I always want to know, how do you make money? How do you satisfy customer value? And then all of our internal support services support that. Because most organizations get bloated, they get fat, they get bureaucratical, and they look internally at self. And we kind of want to blow that up and say, what value do we have for the customer and how do we make money? And then we want our back office to support that. And that's where is a kiss of death. If you start letting your systems and your bureaucracy and your internal structure take over and you get internally focused, it's the first kiss of death, because you lose sight of who you are and who you serve. So we always have to look externally at what is our jobs to be done, while we're also looking internally at our jobs to be done. The third element is, how do you make money? Now, we have, I use the Boston Consulting Matrix, but this is a lot of research from Ram Charan, who wrote the book, What the CEO Wants You to Know. but we've got to take the complexities of finance and simplify it down to what are our drivers? What are our driving forces and factors for how we make money? It's your economic engine. And there's 5 areas that we kind of look at. It's cash, it's margin, it's velocity, it's growth. And we also look at customer, which customers are driving certain types of revenue. And so we've got to understand for everyone in the organization, if I'm in finance, I got to know my money-making model, my 2 drivers. It's probably going to be cash and velocity. If I'm in operations, I got to understand what my drivers are. It's probably margin and it's probably velocity or margin and growth for scale. If I'm in sales and marketing, I better know it's going to be a growth strategy and it's going to be sustainable bets. And I got to look at the customer types. Is it government? Is it corporate? Is it education? Right? Is it tech? Is it commercial? Is it residential? I've got to be able to flex and look at different scenarios because we know, again, I think the wonderful, brilliant boxer Mike Tyson said, all grand strategies are thrown out the window when the first punch is thrown in the ring, right? And so many times you get thrown punches in your competitive ring and you got to make some adjustments, okay? So we run scenarios in that area. The 4th one is our core capabilities. Our core capabilities, when you're thinking about strategy in 1 to 5 years out, generally there's a lot of stuff in the first couple of years that might be low-hanging fruit. And that's our strengths of our business. And so kind of our mini SWOT analysis, we should look at where are we strong and where do we have great opportunity to win now? Because you're sitting on strengths and it's process strengths, it's brand strength, it's market strength, it's some sort of technology competitive advantage. You want to maximize that and you want to make sure that you leverage your core. But you don't want to be it's Arnold Toynbee that said, nothing fails like success. Nothing does. So your old ways of doing things, your old mindsets, your old markets have to be under review. And many times you might not have the capabilities that's going to take you out in years 3, 4, 5, and beyond. And so we're always looking at what do we have? What do we need to develop? What do we need to partner with? What do we need to acquire? Or in some cases, what do we need to divest? It's a dog with fleas. Got to get out of it. So in this phase of, this is the operational capability, and we have kind of 6 core questions we ask to look at a SWOT analysis, but we're always saying, where are you strong and where do you need to improve? And we're also looking at our weaknesses and our threats aligned with how do we satisfy our customers and how do we make money? Those are the 2 anchors that we drive our core capabilities to. We don't just say, what do we want to get better at? What do we want to get better at to go after a certain market or a certain customer type or a certain segment? Or what are we doing to drive one of our drivers on the money-making model with growth or profitability, et cetera, or cutting costs, better managing and reducing costs? So core, that 4th area, think about that as sort of that operating engine that allows us to line on expanding the core and then also driving the future. That 5th step is really about how am I going to dominate and compete and win? And what are my if-then strategies and scenarios? So I'm thinking, what are my plans? What are my objectives? Jim Collins calls them the BHAGs. What are the big, hairy, big, huge, audacious goals over the next 1 to 5 years that we need to be thinking about? Again, we don't want to get stuck by quarter, by week, by month. We got to get into the year, okay, multi-year. And this is where we kind of play out those scenarios. So I want to know 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And then I'm going to bring in my AI and I'm going to bring in my data and I'm going to bring in my analytics. And I'm going to look at where the growth opportunities go or where do we need to cut costs? So for instance, with this hospital I was telling you about, we had to wring out costs. We had to figure out how do we immediately get 15 million done just in cost savings, like in 1 year, while we're also maintaining quality and customer value because we also get on those metrics, we get federal dollars. So we had kind of this cost quality value thing going. So we had our 6 strategic pillars, and then we had to take it down to what are the 2 main things strategically we got to operate on this year across the entire hospital, every department. So again, we're setting it organizationally, and then we're dropping it into the division or department, and then we're going to drop it down into our teams and individually. We're going to have individual KPIs that'll line up to this as well. So let me share one quick example. I was working with a construction company recently. I worked with them for the last 5 years, but they kind of bring me in to reload, and they called me and said, "Hey, they're about 700 million, and they wanted to go to $1 billion." And so about 5 years ago, we set that strategy and we closed the gap, and they went just over $1 billion. And they called me and said, "Look, it's taken us 75 years to get to $1 billion. And we're looking at the data, we're looking at the growth, we're looking at our acquisitions and partnerships. We want organic growth from now over the next 5 years to $3 billion. And I said, "Well, okay, let's talk structure. So where are you now? Where are you trending?" Right. They increased about 300 million. Closed the gap on that, went just over $1 billion. I said, "Now, is that organic or is that also acquisition growth?" And they said, "No, just organic." So we had to look at the numbers. So we got the top 14 people together, did a 2-day offsite. We had the CFO share all the numbers and the growth and where we were. And we came in and we reset the vision and we reset the strategy. And we got the senior team from this, in a sense, almost like a family holding company. And then we came back about a month later, once we got our kind of narrative set up at the C-suite. We brought in all the presidents from all the different businesses and their main core teams to the same offsite place in the Northeast of the US. And we did another 2-day workout. We shared the assumptions and the financial model. And then each business unit went through this 5-step process that I facilitated. And every one of them had to stand up and defend it before we left after the 2 days. And we had $2 billion of growth across the US with this construction company in 5 years with no acquisition growth. And everyone felt comfortable and confident, all the presidents of the different businesses. And we looked at different ways to synergize in new markets and areas where we needed cash infusion and investment. Oh, and by the way, this company is also an ESOP company, an employee-owned company, and they wanted to take $250 million cash and reallocate that to the people inside their company. How do you think that did with retention, with talent acquisition, with development, right? These people have been there 20, 25 years, and they're retiring multimillionaires because of loyalty and helping the growth of the company, if that makes sense, and the reallocation of that cash back into the company. And so those are some things on strategy. Again, I've worked with large companies and then startups that are just running to profitability. I'm working with one right now that's funded by Blackstone, and it's in the solar space. And we're setting strategies and plans and things in motion on growth. And it's, we're talking like tens of millions, not hundreds of millions. And so this works. Now, I don't want to bore you with too much detail here, but I do want to give you the questions. And this is in my book on unlocking potential, chapter 7, pages 67 to 70. But here's each of the questions in more detail on each of those areas, from context, what's coming at us, job to be done, who are our customers, internal, external, money-making model, right? What's our economic sources, our drivers? We've got core capabilities, and what are the risks and weaknesses, and how do we need to make sure we shore those up and lay some pavement as part of our strategy and build the future, either acquiring or developing or outsourcing. A lot of times companies will use an outsource strategy to get their costs down and to get their quality up. And then what are the few mid to long-term range goals? And again, I like short, 1 year, medium, 2 to 3, and then long-term, kind of 3 to 5, kind of that 3 to 5 range. And we're going to, we play out those scenarios. Now, let me give a caveat on this model that you need to be thinking about. If you're in a not-for-profit government organization, a charity, a school, we run a private school here. I'm in our school. It's called Ivy Hall Academy, K through 12. It's not for profit. And so our money-making model is a little bit different. We don't call it money-making model. In nonprofits or government, you're not there to make money. It's called budget allocation or budget utilization. And so our context is, there's a lot of forces and factors in nonprofit. But when you get to the money-making model, you still have to know cash and margin and velocity and growth, like these hospitals I'm working with. Money matters, but they're going to get money from government. They're going to get money from, they just did a big gala down in downtown New York, and they got a couple $1 million in donations, right? And so you might get grants as well. They're always filing for grants and reallocating that cash to work on projects, just like we would here at school. So that third one is not so much about making money, but it's budget allocation, budget adherence, and budget utilization. And what we want to do is make sure, like in many organizations, many people know how to spend money, they forget how to make money. And so we need to say, if you're going after budget, it's not a use it or lose it. You see that a lot in government and how we doing right now with 36 trillion in debt, right? You got to say, how do you best allocate your budget resources for your most mission critical needs? Your customer is mission. Your customer is community. Your customer is taxpayers. Your customer is parents and students that attend your school, right? In a nonprofit private. So we're looking, job to be done might be a little different, and the money-making model might be a little different. So we flex based on whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit. And so I just wanted to kind of call that out. And I have a whole slide deck that deals with kind of the differences between those two. But think about allocation and utilization around mission critical. And that's the same with, if I'm dealing with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, it's the Constitution. It's our foreign partners, strategic partners, and obviously, how do we allocate budgets and even justify budgets or partner in new and better ways? So let me share one example. I was working with General Hogg from the Air Force Medical Services in the Air Force Department. She's in the Pentagon. And Governor Hogg, think about MASH, if you ever saw the movie MASH. She does all of the military services when they drop ship, like if you're going to, let's say, Uganda, and you've got to drop ship supplies and tents and doctors and whatever. So, and you want a strategic location within Africa because we're at war in a certain Middle Eastern area or whatever. So they would bring all the medical people in these areas. Well, guess what's happened in the past? They've had their own budgets for Air Force. Marines has their own budget. You've got all these different joint services that have different budgets. And with cost cutting, they said, we're going to merge all these budgets together. And so you have all these different medical units from all these different joint service areas trying to share budgets versus running their own budgets appropriated by Congress. So what do you have to do on your strategy? You better have a really good business case why you're going to justify that when you go out in Air Force, you're also working jointly with Army, boots on the ground, and you work together to support Navy and Marines. And so it's a different conversation around how you go out and justify your budgets to run what you've normally run in the past that's totally changed based on a congressional oversight and change. So that's just an example of sort of one that I've worked with.
Hey, Michael, on these strategic plans, when you go into organizations, is there one area where you notice that most organizations are kind of the weakest or they struggle with the most? Like, hopefully most organizations have some kind of a mission and a vision or whatever. But is there anywhere where along the line, some of those you spend more time or you notice that they have greater need?
Yeah. First off, I would say every organization is different because I may go into an area, like I was just doing one recently at this country club in Houston with the oil and gas company. They really hadn't gotten together and had strategic planning. They'd done goal setting, and they kind of looked at the short term, but strategic wise, they had some ideas and some things that were out there. But so yes, each organization is a little bit different, but I think the two main areas that people kind of struggle with are who do we serve now, customer, job to be done, and who do we serve in the future? I think people are pretty clear on their financial models, but I think this process gets it more clear and more tight because I'm going to narrow it down to 2 drivers. And then we're going to look through some scenarios around maximizing your core business now. But really the one is let's look through alternatives in the future. Let's get curious around what are the if-then scenarios years 3, 4, and 5, right? And that's a different set of data, and most people don't go there. That requires a leader to be innovative and to be curious and to look at data and to look out in the future. And many times, a lot of leaders get stuck in the quarterly profits or the day-to-day, or we just don't have time to really look at that. I think the other thing, Derek, is that 5th step. People will have a lot of stuff where I'll see Pillar, so I come in on the back end of McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and Monitor. And those companies, if I'm at Eli Lilly or I'm at Evergy or I'm at, they're going to come, you're going to pay $1 million for a strategy. There's going to be all the newly minted MBAs, and they're going to get off the school bus and they're going to get utilized, and you're going to do all their top-down, bottom-up analysis, and you'll have about 50 slides. And there's good data and analytics, but what they don't do is that 2 things that are challenging. They don't always get the strategic plans like this is what you do in 26, this is what you do in 27, this is what you do in 28. And logically, I want to be able to see it, and not just at the top, because many strategies get stuck in a binder as part of a budget dance that happens every year. You go in, I'm going to inflate my budget 20%, and then I know it's going to get cut. And then I'm going to justify my budget for the next year. And then I'm going to have my, 3 to 5 year plan. It's going to be 50 PowerPoint slides, and it doesn't translate down to the operational areas of the business. And it doesn't get down to team and tactical. And it's just that what can the team do 80%? So even when I roll it out to my team, do I keep it simple enough to have a 1 or a 2 page conversation as I drop it down to that department business unit? And then when I drop it down to team and tactical, it's got to be dropped down to what they can do 80%.
Yeah.
Because most people are sitting down at their team or their division looking about, I can't even influence that.
Right.
And they've got to be able to say, what are the 1 or 2 things I can do to drive that 7-point strategy? I can only do 1 or 2 things. And where I sit, I got to have a line of sight strategically. And generally, so they get stuck in the short term, they don't logically see the alignment, and they get frustrated, and then it goes on a binder on a shelf, and next fall we'll revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, any sports analogy would know, and to your thing about Tyson or whatever is, once the first punch is thrown, the strategy goes out the window. It is kind of the thing of, you can spend a lot of time and energy and money getting a really great strategy, but it does eventually have to degrade. I don't, that's not the word that they use, but where they talk about that it has to break down to what the person at the front line, they're the ones that actually do the work. So you can spend all day talking about strategy, but eventually somebody at the front line has to do something
Totally.
for you to move forward.
Yeah. And
We
so
have 10 minutes left, Michael. So I just wanted to do a time check and make sure we can finish up.
I'm open for questions. But Derek, I think back to your point on strategy, I want to push the senior team in that next level out to the future, 5 years out plus. I want to get them on vision 10 years, and I want to give them 3 to 5. And then as you go down in the organization, people are like, they may not even know the goals of what I need to do the next year, let alone projects. What are the strategies? That's like a whole other set of competencies. But I've got to at least get it dropped to the business unit, department, division, and then down to teams. And that comes from working over time on coaching. I do one-on-one coaching, but we've got to get as high as we can, and then drop it, right? And then we've got to do one-on-one coaching. We've got to spend the time so we translate. And then ultimately, when you get down to the KPIs and the competencies of down in the middle, they just want to know the work. And am I working on what's most important? And some of it's strategic and some of it's execution, but both of them need to be aligned. And most times they're not.
Yeah. There's lots of teams out there doing a lot of good work. It's just a matter, is it aligned to the organizational strategy? So, yeah. anybody on the call here have any questions that come up as Michael was kind of walking through the process here, where you're like, yeah, that sounds familiar, or what, where do you get stuck? Is there any questions that you have that can help you with what you're thinking of for 2026? Want to try to make it a little bit interactive. I mean, talking about strategy is exciting and all, but it's a Friday. You got how you engage around this topic.
Yeah, drop it into the chat box, or if you want to come off mute and just ask any questions, fair game.
Cam came off mute.
Cam.
Oh, I was just gonna say that that like I think Jessica can relate to this too, because you partner in different things, and that's kind of where and even Jeff, just with the instructional design, the internal from the top down, it's just kind of fun to be in that part of it where we're kind of trying to make those connections, to overall company organizational strategy. And so that's just resonating with me. And that's all I was going to say is that it's fun to see this.
And what's nice is when you start exercising these competencies and these strategic muscles. I've been working with one client in the Midwest who does all the energy for 2 different states. And I've been working for 9 years. I go in and we reload strategy and we reload goals. And it's interesting how they own it. Like they're asking different questions about the business. And I go in and I mean, we've had one growth bet that was to double the business last year. The other was we closed a gap of $24 million the year before. And this is a utility company. And they're doing core utility rates, and now they're thinking wind and water and solar and electrification. And then how do we get more efficient in our core? So the core is going to take them another 100 years in the future. But guess what the market's doing? It's all about kilowatts and gigawatts, and I mean it's data centers. And you got utility companies going data centers. Oh, okay. AI. We got crypto. We got it's a different game. It's a game they weren't even playing 5 years ago. And then you looked at everyone's going after wind and water because they're sexy and political, and they're long term. But like EVs are dogs with fleas. We don't have the infrastructure, and you'll even have political mandates saying we got to be 100% X. Listen to the data. The infrastructure is not there. It'll be there in 10 years, but don't put your money down on EV. Now you can go hybrid, but you want to get, still the cars, 90% of the cars are fuel efficient gas. That's the growth. Is it new? Is it used? Is it service? But then you're going to go hybrid. You'll go after EV, but if you're investing all your money on that and the infrastructure is not there, so go after solar. Solar will double your business. EV will spend every dollar you have, you're going to spend on EV, and it's going to be a dog with fleas. And most people, even at the top, they don't even know it, or they can't communicate it because political waves will take you one way or the other. Don't listen to the politics. Look at the data. And so the context is a big deal.
Organizations kind of figure out a little bit. Sometimes they're maybe chasing the wrong thing or something. You just help them at least think through it. Maybe it is the right thing and it is a strategy. And if they go all in on it, you can at least help them execute on that strategy. It might not be the right strategy. It might not develop, but you'll help them at least kind of go through it, think it through, get really clear on it.
Yeah.
It'll be well communicated. People will all know which direction they're going. That's kind of the outcomes that we have here.
Totally.
We have I think about 3 minutes left here. Any other questions from anybody? We want to make sure we're responsive to any questions you had or any expectations you were hoping that we would cover today. We haven't.
Hopefully this has been helpful just to start a conversation, right? And is there, can you see going into year end or kicking off the new year where this might be appropriate for your organization? Because we just say, we meet organizations wherever they are, we're executive teams, wherever they are, leadership teams. We'll meet you where you are. and get you to have a structured framework. We call it strategy made simple, strategy made practical. And because you get lost in a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of stuff that can, rabbits chasing lots of different rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And
And like
you want to be
I-
targeted.
I know that most teams and the people on this call that might not be the ones that set the big high level strategy, but on here are busy. They're working harder than ever, more hours than ever. It's not a matter of that they're not that they're doing bad work. It's just sometimes if the strategy isn't clear, there's a lot of busyness, but it might not be driving the metrics you're hoping for. So that's good. And then Cam's asking about the topic for the next webinar. We've been discussing that, Michael. Did we land on our topic for our next?
Yeah,
in
I
January?
think the natural one, I mean, it's either we go upstream to vision and mission values, but we go downstream, which is more practical, I think, as we're heading into year end to how do we set smart strategic goals? And what do those goal metrics look like at the top, at the middle, strategic, operational, team, and tactical? And so I think going into year end, we probably want to do our next one on goal clarity, goal design, goal alignment, goal execution, and just talk through some of the basic metrics that we need to be thinking about that matter most at whatever level you're at.
So more the tactics. This is kind of more of that higher level strategic thinking and planning. Then we can drop down into more tactics that have to be implemented well in order to deliver on any kind of a strategy. So we'll have a date that we'll put together and send out to everybody as well. So you'll know our next one that will be coming up.
Yeah.
And we also for today's discussion. And then I don't know if you had a slide, Michael, or if I can send that in the follow-up.
Yeah, here's the next one, or the call to action. That we want to, if you want a handout or any information that we've talked about that would be helpful just to start thinking about, we've got, we can get you the model or whatever. Certainly in the book, there's a whole chapter on it. If you want to schedule a call, a 30, 60-minute call where we'd love to scope or explore any of the organizational or department or team needs. And then we can schedule a time to calendar a date if you want to do a workout offsite. Derek's really manages all of that. Derek, is that all? That's all accurate? And
yeah, that's good. As far as the calendar dates, so if there's some urgency around getting that strategic plan, put together and finalized and all that before the end of the year, Michael has some availability kind of mid-November. We might have a day or two in December, and then we'll be moving into January. And even then, that can be kind of more, again, the work that's about translating maybe some of the strategy you've already put together, also refining it. It never hurts to take that binder off the shelf, even after you just barely put it there, and refine it. So if there's some urgency around dates, we have a couple available still left the end of this year. Let me know, and I'll get to you with some dates. And then just the final one, Michael, I wanted to pose this question. Paul asked the question around your coaching offerings. Is it a one-on-one kind of an executive coaching or group, or how do you do the coaching?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I'll just use an example. Here in about 15 minutes, I'll be jumping off this call, and I've got a CFO from a large solar company, and it's the one that I'd mentioned that was the investors Blackstone, and we've been coaching. I meet him once to twice a month. So we kind of have it in his calendar where we do a kind of a half day once a month. It's 2-3 hours. And so I have 2 sessions. We'll do one here today, and then I'll do one in 2 weeks, kind of face to face. But most of it can be virtual just to keep the cost down. He's outside of the state of Utah. And we're coaching for 6 months. And so we just kind of set up as it's a 1-day billable. I can do it as a retainer or billable. And that includes all the materials, all the toolbox, any pre-work, post-work. We're doing right now some things where he's trying to develop his talent on his team. And so we have some tools we're using for that. Also managing stakeholder conversations up with boss and the board of directors. and with customers and partners. We're also looking at some of these strategy things on growth. So we got a 6-month workout, and then we'll decide after 6 months if it's added significant value, and we'll probably do a reload for another 6 months. But for right now, it's one-on-one, it's confidential. And then I can also coach teams, executive teams or leadership teams. And I could do like a 2 90-minute sessions or 2 2-hour sessions in the morning, and I could do 2 in the afternoon. So I could take 4 people or whatever over a day. And I'm coaching a group of people as well in Malaysia. So I just came out of a leadership work session, and now I coach every other month. I have a team of about 40 people, and they're in 4 different cohorts in a day. And I go through and coach each of those cohort groups as well. And we just do a billable day. And that's over, we'll do that over 3 sessions every other month for 3 sessions.
Yeah, it's good to hear some exact examples of how you're doing these things. And then Paul, if there's interest, respond to my follow-up email. We obviously can tailor it based on whatever your needs are if you want to explore that a little bit further. But we appreciate your time. We're at time. If Michael's got to jump on that next call, but if there's anybody that wants to stay on and has a burning question and try to use some of Michael's time right now, we can stay on for a little bit. But otherwise, thanks for coming out today, for joining. We appreciate you jumping on and developing yourself and getting more understanding around how to get a little bit better at that strategic planning that's always so tricky. Hope your 2026 is amazing. And we hope we have the opportunity to partner with you in some of the great things you're doing. Thanks. Everybody can sign off if you need to. If you want to stay on, we'll stay on for another minute or two here.
Thanks, everyone.